Oh, hello. Uh, is my mic on? Yeah, my mic is on. Well, welcome to all of those worshiping online and all of those who have joined us in-house for our second week of our Ecclesiastes study, where we will be taking a closer look at Ecclesiastes 1, the first chapter of Kohelet's chef d'oeuvre, if you will, his magnum opus of his life's work. As we begin today, I want to make a quick note to all of those viewing online that I made sure I wore a more subdued pattern than last week. And I have a praise to share. At least it's a praise to me. For me, the last time I wore this shirt, it was a bit more snug than it is tonight. So that's a great feeling. And then also, many of you, or a few of you, pointed out to me that last week our live stream cut out before we were finished. And that's because we ran out of storage space on our YouTube channel. So we had to go back and clear out some videos, some older videos in the archives to make room for this. So it should be all good for tonight. So with that, let's begin with prayer, and then we'll launch into tonight's study. Holy and gracious God, one of the many marvels that we have at the words of Scripture is that they represent the totality of the human experience. The human experience, as you know, O God, is not always easy. It is not always meaningful or understandable. And Kohelet's words represent that for us. And we can resonate with that. And so speak to us and teach us through Kohelet's words by the power of your Spirit, so this ancient wisdom text can speak to us in this new day. It is in the name of Jesus that we gather and pray. Amen. So I want to begin with a quick recap from last week. Just a few things to cover for those of us who are joining for the second week, but also those who may be joining us for the first time in this study. If you've not watched our first session, I would encourage you to do so because we talked a lot about background information. But here are a couple of key things that you need to know as we go into tonight. First and foremost, the author of Ecclesiastes is anonymous. Although tradition has said it was written by Solomon, it definitely was not written by Solomon, and we don't know who the author is. We do refer in scholarship to the author of Ecclesiastes as Kohelet. While it is not a proper name, it is a sobriquet or a nickname meaning proclaimer, or the one who assembles as a preacher or a teacher in Hebrew. Kohelet also presents himself as a learned individual who likely resided in a metropolitan area such as Jerusalem. He most certainly was a Jew, and a devout Jew at that, although he had some sharp criticisms for his own Jewish tradition. I also want to make an additional note about the author that I learned in my own further research and study today. The word Kohelet can also mean collector. And so it it is also related to that assembler theme. And so Kohelet can also mean a collector of wisdom. Yeah. So Kohelet has a lot of varied different meanings, and it's an adequate and appropriate nickname for the author. Ecclesiastes was most likely written between the 3rd and 2nd century BCE, and we know this because of the development of the Hebrew language and the presence of Greek philosophical ideas consistent with that time, particularly around the time of Greek conquest, when the Greek Empire spread its culture and its language throughout the ancient Near Eastern world, and we call that Hellenization. The word Greece in Greek is Hellas, and so Hellenism, Hellenization, Hellenistic is all pertaining to Greek culture. Okay? And actually, it is still called Hellas in Greek today if you go to Greece, just as an FYI. The main theme of Ecclesiastes, as we touched on last week, is the Hebrew word hevel, literally puff or vapor. In our translations of the Bible, we find it rendered as vanity, empty, meaningless, futile, cum de l'inconsistance in French, the height of inconsistency, or absurd. And remember, chapter 1, verse 2, in most translations of the Bible says something to the effect of vanity of vanities, says Kohelet. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Now, before we advance to the next slide, if you recall last week, I had us do an exercise together where we closed our eyes and I had you take that deep breath in and that deep breath out. And I said, that breath, that puff, that vapor is your life. And this is one of the parts I love about being a pastor and a teacher and a Bible study leader, because I can come back this week and say that was not a very good thing for us to do. It actually missed the point. And I did not realize that, and I unintentionally misled you in the meaning of the word hevel. And so I want to come back and correct that. And the word hevel in Hebrew denotes that quick, gruff sigh of dissatisfaction. That is hevel. The husband does not put the toilet seat down after he's done. The wife does not replace the toilet paper roll after it's emptied. What's more is she put it on backwards rather than frontwards like God intended. The teenager puts an empty milk carton back into the refrigerator. I keep hearing news reports about how gas prices keep going down, and yet it's still $3.29 over here at the Speedway. Guess I'm going to the south side to fill up now. That's hevel. That quick, gruff sigh of dissatisfaction. It is very different, isn't it? And it's the kind of sigh, if you can bring that slide up, Etha, the second slide. It's the kind of sigh that suggests pointlessness. Like, really? Seriously? But it's also the kind of sigh that borders on hopelessness and despair, but it's not quite there yet. It's not that exasperated, I give up. It's that pointless, empty toilet paper roll, empty milk carton in the fridge, gas prices that have not come down. It's that kind of, seriously, really? And so every time we read the word vanity, or whatever your translation of the Bible uses, here's what I would encourage you as you read it at home in preparation for our sessions. Whenever you see this word, instead of reading it, make that sound and see what kind of life that text takes on. I have seen that this is and chasing after wind. Takes on a new nuance, doesn't it? I have seen that this too is and chasing after it. A side note, all of the pictures that you will see in this slideshow I have taken with my camera, and this picture is actually Patrick, my partner's breath. And so it was one of those really cold, actually, I'll be honest with you, I took it this past summer. And we went to an ice cream shop in downtown Indianapolis, and we got those frozen, like candied ice balls, and you eat them and you can breathe out the, and that's how I got that picture. I had to stage it. And I ate one too, and I did it, and it was absolutely nasty. I'll never get them again. But at least I got my picture. I got my breath picture. Yeah. So Ecclesiastes 1 is short enough that we can read in together tonight. And so I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version. I invite you to turn there in your Bibles, whatever translation they might be, to follow along. And I'm going to make some edits along the way. And one of them is reading this chapter out loud. And instead of reading the word vanity, I'm going to make that sound. So maybe wherever you are, you might want to make it with me. The words of Kohelet, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Says Kohelet, all is. What do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Round and round goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they continue to flow. All things, or all words, are wearisome, more than one can express. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, "See, this is new"? It has already been in the ages before us. The people of long ago are not remembered, nor will there be any remembrance of people yet to come by those who come after them. I, Kohelet, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I applied my mind to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given humans to be busy with. I saw all the deeds that are done under the sun, and see, all is and a chasing after it. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my mind has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my mind to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this is also but a chasing after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and those who increase knowledge increase in sorrow. So what did you hear in that? Say again. Someone has given up hope. Yeah. There is a sense of hopelessness in there, isn't there? Yeah. What else did you hear in that?
No matter what you do, time continues on.
Yeah. Yeah. Time marches on. Streams are going to flow into the seas. The sun is going to keep on doing its thing. In this understanding of the cosmos, we know that this is a little bit different than what Kohelet implies. The earth is going to keep right on spinning. Yeah. The cycles of nature. Yeah. And but it ends kind of bleakly, doesn't it? In that poetic opening, the people of long ago are not remembered, nor will there be any remembrance of people yet to come by those who come after them. And it's kind of saying, listen, we're all going to die. And the cycles of nature are screaming this to you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And oh, one more thing, after you die, you will be quickly forgotten. The word of the Lord, thanks be to God. It's not exactly a pretty picture, but it is true. You know, not long ago, and as a side note, I took an evening walk through the Bethel cemetery. I pastored here a year before I even stepped foot in that cemetery. I mean, I really don't hang out in graveyards. Grieving really isn't my style. But I was struck by how many of those headstones have no inscription on them, because time has eroded them away. You can't even read anything. It's just a piece of rock, basically. And if you look on the diagram in the office, those headstones are blank because we don't know who is buried there. We don't know their stories. We don't know their identities. And you know, if they were buried in the early 1800s, you know, what kind of memories might they have carried with them? Did they remember the American Revolution? Did they remember the signing of the Declaration of Independence and the ratification of the Constitution? We'll never know. And so, over time, those memories of those individuals has been forgotten. There's a Native American proverb that says, everyone dies twice. The first time is when we breathe last, and the second time is the last time our name is spoken. Yeah. And so this is what Kohelet is opening with. And he is telling us that life is full of these moments. They are inevitable. They are unavoidable. They happen to us all the time. In fact, they're so commonplace that Apple iOS software has developed an emoji for it that we can use in text messages. That is, in a very real sense, the Hevel, the emoji. And we can articulate that in text and in life. And throughout his book, Kohelet will acknowledge that there is much good that life has to offer to us. But in all of that goodness, those moments poke little holes into it. Tiny, microscopic. We probably don't even know that they are there because in the grand scheme of things, we don't even really let them get to us. 5-10 minutes later, we're back to normal, and But over time, all of those little holes accumulate, and they connect, and they make bigger holes that can lead to hopelessness and despair and anger. How many times in our lives, and I'm not a parent, but for the parents in the room and joining us online, the teenager puts the empty milk carton back into the refrigerator, and you're like, ugh, really? Seriously? But then, 2 months later, you are in an argument with your teenager, and all of a sudden you blow up about that carton of milk. And that moment morphs into something so much more and something so much greater. But these sighs, these are also signals to us that change is possible. Any exhalation makes breathing in new air possible. Something can happen. You can put the toilet seat down. You can replace the toilet paper. You can buy a new carton of milk. you can drive to the south side to get gas. That sigh is an empty space, and we'll come back to this, an empty space that allows possibilities to emerge. Remember that exhalation, we have to exhale to take in the new.
It's almost like a begrudging having to do to go get that constantly have to put the toilet seat down, and so it can be solved, but there's not much joy in it at that moment.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily convenient either. It takes some effort, but there's also some reward involved, right? You know, if I drive to the south side to get gas, I've saved almost 50 cents a gallon, and that is no joke. You're welcome. Yes, it's 50 cents cheaper down there per gallon. Why? I don't know. So, you know, if we think about even just those small things, there can be some reward, and not to get too far ahead of myself, some payoff, some gain that can come our way too. Bernice, you had your hand up.
It's kind of like I always say, not being able to control what is going on around us, what's being done and what's being said, but like controlling how we respond and react to that.
Correct.
So, you know, but then, you know, like you said, we could just go get a carton milk, put it in there, and, you know, so how many times do we want to really let it before we just solve it? Move on.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's what we do with them. And we can just let them be, or we can accept the possibilities as they come to us. This also gets really difficult when these hevel moments do kind of become those sighs of exasperation and the hopelessness and the despair that can come to it. Another word is grief. You know, I don't think an empty milk carton or fluctuating gas prices in Indianapolis is really a cause for hopelessness and despair. It could be, yeah. I will say, you know, but for that resident of Indianapolis who just got issued the pink slip and just got laid off of their job, their gas tank is empty, and they leave work on the south side and they come up here and it's 50 cents more expensive, or they come home and there's an empty milk carton in the fridge, that could poke a much larger hole. That could punch a hole in, and so that quick sigh of dissatisfaction can become an exasperated sigh of despair very, very quickly. Yeah, it's a great point.
It's like the straw that breaks the camel's back.
The straw that breaks the camel's back. Yeah. Yeah, that's the frayed end of the rope that we cannot hold on to anymore. Yeah.
To take that to an extreme, the exhale of breath is ultimately death,
Yeah.
but the inhale is not yet.
Not yet. Absolutely. Yeah, and you know, I read a devastating story this morning on Facebook. A friend of mine posted it. And it told the story of a young man named Mark. And Mark had a life full of just moments. And you know, he was, from what I could tell, was younger than me, a very attractive man. He was born deaf, and his parents never bothered to learn ASL, and so he went through much of his early life with no one able to communicate with him, and he was not able to communicate with anyone. And his parents finally enrolled him in a school for the deaf where he was able to learn ASL at age 6, and you know, he said that those were some of the happiest years of his life. And but still, kind of that relationship with his family was very strained. And recently, he came out as gay to his mom. And his mother absolutely berated him and then told him that she did not care if he lived or not. And that was that final sigh. And sadly, this past weekend, Mark took his own life. And, that's just one example of many, many stories when that can quickly turn into, when those holes just create a massive crater that causes the whole thing to fall apart. It's a very sad story. Yeah. But again, we do see that that Kohelet tells us that those hevel sighs signal to us that change is possible. We can still breathe in new air and move forward. But what causes these hevel moments in the first place? Well, let's take a look again at verse 3 of chapter 1. And if I know we've got some different translations in the room, and I would love to hear what those translations might say. Can you read out?
I got the NIV version. Says, "What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun?"
What do people gain from all their labors at which they toil under the sun? Does anybody have anything slightly different than that? Got another NIV? Something close enough, maybe? Yeah, the NRSV says, "What do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun?" And so that question, if we can have the next slide come up, please. Kohelet uses the word gain, which is the Hebrew word yitron, 16 times in the book of Ecclesiastes. It's actually one of the most commonly repeated words in the book. And what is meant by the word gain? Well, strictly speaking, it is an economic term that can mean profit or payoff. But it is also an economic term that can have cultural implications. It can also mean excess, privilege, or advantage. And that word privilege is a huge word, especially in our cultural context. When we think about racial justice, reconciliation, the nature of white privilege, and those conversations that can many times be difficult but have to be had if we're going to live in a racially just society. And so we can ask the question, what do people gain? What is the privilege? What is the advantage? What is the payoff? What is the profit from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? Now, toil is not just merely work or labor or toil. It means all the ways we as mortals can occupy our time. It is a big word, and it can cover a lot. So, we can also ask the question, what do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? Or, can you go, okay, no, I don't want, this is fine. Let's take a look. I got ahead of myself here. Sorry about that. About the phrase under the sun. Tahat Hashemesh. So think about the word yitron, gain, is used 16 times. The phrase Tahat Hashemesh, under the sun, is used 25 times throughout the book, and twice in chapter 1 alone. So what is meant by the word under the sun? I love what the biblical scholar Peter Enns has written in his commentary on Ecclesiastes. He says, under the sun does not mean on earth as opposed to heaven. The phrase, also found in Phoenician inscriptions from the 5th century BCE, refers simply to the realm of the living as opposed to the netherworld, the realm of the dead. In other words, the meaning of the phrase is not to imply that Kohelet's search is restricted in any way, but the exact opposite. His gaze is everywhere throughout the land of the living. We are told here that Kohelet searched high and low, far and wide. He left no stone unturned. So think about the verse. What do people gain? What kind of privilege, advantage, gain, profit, payoff do people have with all of the ways they can occupy their time in the way of the universe, in the land of the living, in the way things are? It's a pretty bold question. And so it's a big question. The next slide, kind of have a progressive development here. What do people gain from all the toil at which they toil under the sun? Or we could say, what real value is there for a person in all the gains they make beneath the sun? Or put yet another way, what sort of meaning do people gain from all the emptiness they encounter in the land of the living, in the way of the universe? Thoughts, questions, comments?
Well, we learned how to survive and keep going.
Yeah.
You get to do it all over again, just as the endless circle.
Yeah.
You work just to survive, just to eat, just to take care of your needs, just to go turn around and survive, just do it all over again and again and again.
Yeah. If this time didn't work out, just keep breathing. You'll get your chance. It'll come back to you. Yeah. Anything else? Well, Kohelet turns to the cycles of nature next. He offers this beautiful poetic offering in verses 4 through 9. So let's revisit those scriptures together. A generation comes and a generation goes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hurries to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Round and round goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they continue to flow. All things are wearisome, more than one can express. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. So what Kohelet is saying here is that in a way, just as we inhale and exhale, even in those moments, nature also in a way inhales and exhales. Nature, in many ways, knows how to empty itself. And being part of nature, we experience that emptiness too. And again, as we alluded to before, that state of emptiness. So if you can imagine that inhalation and that quick, now hold it. That moment is pregnant with possibilities. And sometimes we must wait in that emptiness for those possibilities to emerge. We don't know what those possibilities will be, but sometimes we have to wait and to abide in that emptiness and wait for that wait for those possibilities to come about. So, it's not exactly one of those popular messages that we want to hear. We don't want to talk about the beauty and the blessing of emptiness. But in other traditions of philosophy and religion around the world, they emphasize this emptying as a way to be reborn and renewed. How many of you have ever read the Tao Te Ching? Anyone? Lao Tzu? Yeah, in the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu offers these incredible words. We join spokes together in a wheel, but it is the center hole, that empty spot in the middle, that makes the wagon move. We shape clay into a pot, but it is the emptiness inside that holds whatever we want. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. In short, if we choose to see them as such, the empty places, that space in between one breath and the next, is the way of the universe blessing us with the chance to create meaning and to pursue possibility. So, any further thoughts on that? Questions?
That's a whole flip on what we've been discussing, as opposed to vanity and emptiness. That's hope. That's
Yeah.
the opposite.
Yeah. And so why does it come across as hopeless? Because one of the things, Joseph mentioned earlier that when we read chapter 1, it sounds really hopeless, like someone who has given up hope. And I would not say Kohelet has given up hope here. I would say Kohelet has suspended hope.
And if we could just like, in that moment of emptiness, if we could just wait instead of, because that's what we struggle with, waiting. We always want something to be there. So maybe by us not realizing that there is something in that moment of emptiness, if we fail to wait, maybe we miss it.
Absolutely. And related to that is because we are conditioned to view time linearly. Past, present, future. Right? Kohelet does not view time that way. He views it with the rest of nature as a cycle, as this cyclical, almost circular pattern. There's nothing new. What goes around comes around. And yeah. And so when we enter into those empty moments, those moments of emptiness, those moments of, if we're going to approach it holistically, we must rise above the confines, the compartmentalizing of past, present, and future, and start thinking about time as cycle. And in some spiritualities, including Christianity, there is this concept of the eternal now. Maybe you've heard of that, maybe not. The concept of time is viewed as all of past, present, and future linking together and moving as one and creating this eternal now. And and of course, by the time we get to chapter 3, we will see that time is a major theme in Kohelet's writings. So, any other thoughts?
It reminds me of the concept of meditation, of just emptying yourself and allowing emptiness to exist and to bring calm.
Yeah. Yeah. To sit with the silence.
It's like seeking that nothingness
Yeah.
for that calm.
Striving for it. Yeah.
So I think what you said like is the emptiness, like the presence, like creating all the possibilities. Kind of I would say Buddhism, where they pretty much like nothing exists within itself, independent of everything. Okay, well, this is new now, but you go to the store like, oh, I know they have these cookies here. It's something I had since I was a child, and now like all these different possibilities that just kind of stacks on each other, like.
Yeah.
But like I said, nothing exists within itself, so everything is still like interconnected, interlocked, even though it's empty moments. But if that never happened, you would never have seen all those possibilities that can like derive from it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I will say that Buddhists love the book of Ecclesiastes. They really do, because there is that eternal now, that focus on emptiness and self-emptying. There's also a focus on impermanence, that everything changes and nothing stays the same. Or better stated, nothing stays the same unless everything changes. Sit with that for a bit. Sit with that. Yeah. And meditate on that for a while. That'll keep you awake at night. But yeah, and it's very, very similar. Or you go to the grocery store to get that carton of milk and you see a friend you haven't seen in a very long time. And you strike up a conversation with them. And all of a sudden, what you thought was a minor inconvenience becomes life-giving to you. Dan, you had your hand up.
You heard the phrase, you don't appreciate something until you don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
Bethel is letting everything out into emptiness, appreciating the next breath, going forward the next cycle.
Yeah, that release prepares us to receive. It postures us in that state of appreciation to receive what is coming next. Yeah, it's a great observation. Yeah. Great. So let's pivot here and take a look at Kohelet's understanding and consideration of Jewish wisdom tradition. This part of the study is going to be a whole lot of fun. In the second section of chapter 1, Kohelet says that he has spent much of his life pursuing wisdom in and beyond his own Jewish tradition. And this section is one of the more autobiographical parts of Kohelet's work. Here he is very introspective and reflective at the same time. And he goes on to say that the pursuit of wisdom is an unhappy business that God has given humans to be busy with. And he concludes yet again, all is vanity and a chasing after the wind. And then he concludes the chapter by saying, for in much wisdom is much vexation, and those who increase knowledge increase sorrow. So how did Judaism understand wisdom? I mentioned last week that in Judaism, in Jewish wisdom tradition, wisdom is an external body of truths. Pre-existent, established, and unquestioned. Wisdom is regarded as being present with God at creation and given by God to creation. And we even see in Proverbs chapter 8 the personification of wisdom. You may know of Lady Wisdom. So let's turn there, if you will, Proverbs chapter 8. So it begins, does not wisdom call and understanding raise her voice? On the heights beside the way, at the crossroads she takes her stand. Beside the gates in front of the town, at the entrance of the portal she cries out. And then we have the invitation of Lady Wisdom. To you, O people, I call, and my cry is to all who live. Now, if you move forward down to verse 22, this is wisdom still speaking. She says, the Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of long ago. Ages ago I was set up at the first before the beginning of the earth. When there were no depths, I was brought forth, where there were no springs abounding with water. And then she goes on to say, I was present with God at creation. She also takes time in this passage to issue her invitation. Take a look at go up and take a look at verse 17. I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. And then again, down at verse 35, for whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord, but those who miss me injure themselves. All who hate me love death. And so wisdom in Judaism is external to us. It is outside of us. Wisdom is something we must seek. It is something we must seek and find. We do not seek out anything by wisdom. We seek wisdom itself. Does that make sense? Maybe? Yeah, that's also Proverbs. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And elsewhere we see in Proverbs that the fear of the Lord. The fear of the Lord does not mean being afraid of God. Yeah, it means acknowledging and honoring God's presence in one's life. So as we acknowledge and honor God's presence in our life, that is the beginning of our search for wisdom. Our search for wisdom is a response to the fear of the Lord. Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions?
It'll rack your mind to think of some of the evil people do to people, even though they claim they love. But a child knows nothing but, oh, this is my mom, they love me, they provide for me, they protect me. But the more you know, the more you get to know of this world, you're really be ignorant sometimes. Like it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a philosophy professor in college who said, ignorance is bliss, but it's only blissful when you're ignorant. That's one of those lines you hear in class and you never forget it. Ignorance is bliss, but it's only blissful when you're ignorant. Because once you know, that bliss can go away really, really fast.
Creates more worries and concerns and possibilities for.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Yeah. I also had another professor who told me once that a little education is a dangerous thing. Yeah. One of those other lines I've never forgotten.
Around some people like that Sunday, I was like, am I going to say something here or am I? So I said a few words and they were like, oh yeah, I am. And I thought, okay, I had dinner, let me go. I'm at somebody else's house. I don't like the conversation. I can go. But you know.
Should I say something? But I'm like, dang, what they say is very ignorant. And if you just take 2 seconds to look it up, you can see that you're wrong.
Uh-huh.
But like, it seemed I'm like, it's no point. Like, I feel like it's just echo chamber. It's no point in me even wasting time. And I always struggle with that. I'm like, should I say something? I mean, if you see something wrong, you should say something, correct people. But I'm like, it's pointless. Like, it's the internet.
Yeah.
It's gonna always. I always go back and forth with things like that.
Oh, yeah. You can imagine being a pastor. Life is full of those moments. Like, do I say something here? Or do I just keep my mouth shut? I even had that moment. It came to my attention, and I won't say who, but I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to give details, but basically, it got back to me that one person, I don't know if they are still a member here or not, but they attended here at one time, but do not anymore. I do not know this person. But she said to one of our church members that the reason why our sign was destroyed was because someone came with a sledgehammer and destroyed it because your pastor is gay. I know, right? It's not like this is new information. Now the member was like, you're completely out of it here. Like, we have photographic evidence of the car after it plowed into it. No, God told me. And I was, apparently our photos are photoshopped. So anyway, that phone conversation ended with a click. Because there was nothing. You cannot have a rational conversation with an irrational person. Yeah. And I don't know how we got off on that. But, I know what I was going to say. After I heard that, I wanted to go home and post the pictures of our destroyed sign and make this Facebook post. And, kind of make this woe is me. Look at what I have to endure. This is how I must suffer for the gospel. Yes, it was a big moment. Like, really? Seriously? Of all things? But, but you think about it and you take a step back and you're like, and I thought, what good would that do? What good would that do? And so I just had to let that breath be and move on and wait to talk about it in Bible study. Right? That's right. So, going back to Jewish wisdom, it's an external body of truths. Michael Fox, in his book, A Time to Tear Down and a Time to Build Up, says the truths of wisdom literature, Job, Proverbs, and then the apocryphal books, Ben Sirach and Wisdom of Solomon, would have us learn the truths of wisdom literature, would have us learn are already given. They're already given to us. And one need only imbibe them to make them one's own wisdom. Once you have found wisdom, you need only to embrace it. Hold to it. Wisdom is and has always been out there waiting for your embrace. So Hebrew wisdom demands our assimilation and thus forbids our experiential observation. Imbibe and embrace. That is how you gain wisdom in conventional Jewish wisdom tradition. Seek it, find it, imbibe it, embrace it. Settled.
But the last part forbids our experiential observation?
Yes. Meaning your experience and your observation
Does not contribute to your wisdom?
No, because wisdom is external to you. So whatever your experience is, whatever your observations are in life, doesn't matter. That isn't wisdom. You seek wisdom out there. You find it. You imbibe it. You embrace it. You pattern your life around it, and thus you have a virtuous life. Experiences, observations don't mean anything until Kohelet comes along.
That's what I was
I was
getting
gonna
ready to
say,
say,
I
because
mean,
it was eternal thing, and it just
Yeah,
make it work.
yeah, because Kohelet, yeah. So this is really, so I love this picture of the cactus that I took at Joshua Tree National Park. Because when you think about wisdom like this, it gets really thorny really fast. Because you're kind of left thinking, that's not good enough. And something is seriously lacking here. And Kohelet sees that. He knows it. And he dares to do something about it. He's been there. He's done that. He's applied his life to learning wisdom. And he's found that this old imbibe and embrace method is nothing more than, that's it. That's all it is. And so what Kohelet does is rely on his own experiences and observations to discover wisdom and meaning in his own life. And he refuses to rely on an age-old dusty collection of proverbialisms in order to live a virtuous life. He is his own source. A virtuous inquiry. And he said, everything you need to gain wisdom is already within you. And all you need to do is draw from your own experiences and your own observations.
it's being open to learn.
Mm-hmm. It does. It involves an openness. It requires an openness. Seeking wisdom, pursuing a life of wisdom is, where was I going with this? It's not for the closed-minded. It's not for the narrow-minded. Because the first thing life will teach you is that your narrowness needs to broaden. Your closedness needs to open. And some people are willing to do that, and some people are unwilling to do that. Now, I will say, this whole external body of truth, this external body of wisdom that we seek out, we find, we imbibe and embrace, that is just as true in our day as it was in Kohelet's. Do you know why certain traditions of Christianity can still retain such a strength in membership and even grow? Because they claim to offer all the answers. You don't have to think. We have the answers for you. We'll give them to you, imbibe them, embrace them, apply them to your life, and you're a good Christian. People love black and white. They don't like gray. They don't like ambiguity. But the last time I checked, life is pretty dadgum ambiguous. Life is full of grayness. And so a responsible faith, a responsible wisdom, does not give trite dogmas and platitudes to erase that ambiguity, but to equip you with the resources, the spiritual resources that you need to embrace the ambiguities of life. And that is one of the great strengths of traditions like United Methodism. I honestly think people are hungry for that. People out there who have never had a church experience crave a safe space that doesn't tell them what to think and what to do, that doesn't tell them how to behave. And if you don't behave this way, you're going to hell. They don't want that. That's not good news. But how do we journey through the ambiguities of life together in community, supporting one another? I offer that just for the good of the cause. And so Kohelet is like, listen, enough of that, because it doesn't work. And what's more is, as we journey through Ecclesiastes, Kohelet does not demand his readers accept his conclusions. These are Kohelet's conclusions and only Kohelet's conclusions. The only thing Kohelet demands is, go and do thou likewise. Go and do what I have done. Go and observe. Go and experience. Go and live. And derive wisdom from your living. So, in sum, the dry, transactional, imbibe and embrace mantra has gotten an upgrade to an invitational pursue and discern. So we've moved from imbibe and embrace to pursue and discern. Kohelet's pioneering and trailblazing work. This is the first time this invitation has entered the Jewish wisdom tradition. First time. And it was undoubtedly shocking in his day. There was debate over whether or not Kohelet's work should be included in Scripture, because it is so inconsistent with much of Scripture, and especially the wisdom tradition. And it can be unsettling in our day. You know, we've already kind of alluded to this, but I'm just curious, where have you seen assimilation demanded? Where have you seen no other option but imbibe and embrace? We've already kind of talked about some traditions of Christianity that adopt this method, but what other places have you seen this at work?
Sometimes parenting. Don't question, just obey.
Yeah. One of the most frequent reasons I got growing up when I was told to do or not to do something and I asked why was, because I said so. Yeah. And how is that different than, well, why do I need to do this? Why do I not need to? Well, because the Bible says so. Yeah.
Under dictatorship.
Dictatorships. Fall in line. You've got your marching orders.
Don't think, just do it.
Right. Yeah.
And don't get educated.
Yeah.
When you think of the Taliban and after 6th grade, females are not allowed to pursue education.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I actually thought about the women's rights movement and how for a long time women were told to assimilate and kind of pursue their dreams, discerning their own path was forbidden, and that they just had to fall in line with whatever their father and then later their husband told them to do. And so the women's rights and the feminist movement or the women's liberationist movement is still very recent in the grand scheme of things. And is being challenged. And is still challenged. And it's not just places like Iran. Yeah. And this is becoming our story.
Some religions that still adhere to that same type of doctrine where the woman's only good enough, enough education to be able to do certain things like take care of the house.
Uh-huh.
That's it, and have children where pretty much don't know nothing else. Like that's all you need enough to know how to do that. Read enough to do recipes, to know like measurements and recipes.
Yeah.
But there's still some religions.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's supposed to be Christian religions, actually. That's supposed to be.
Absolutely. And I see it, and we see it all the time. I've already alluded to this. I didn't know I was going to be alluding to this as much as I did, but I think about the LGBTQ plus community that we're forced to basically assimilate in society, and in doing so hide, pretend. Kind of pursuing their true identities, their true selves, and living into the fullness of their humanity was forbidden. And I mean, it wasn't until the 50s, 60s, and 70s that a lot of rights and, LGBTQ plus rights are still challenged to this day and are still very much under attack. But it wasn't too long ago that a lot of it was criminalized. And that, if there were two men dancing in a club, they could be arrested for that. Yeah. That's not been that long ago. But you know what history tells us? All assimilationist representations, all expressions demanding our assimilation, imbibe and embrace, will eventually fall apart at some point. It will not last. So when they do fall apart, how do we pick up the pieces? How do we pick up the pieces? What do we do next? I brought with me today, I'm also being mindful of the time, we're wrapping things up here. I brought with me a quote. I am a huge fan of Bishop John Shelby Spong, the late Episcopal Bishop of Newark. And whenever those expressions collapse, there will be some grief. There will be some second guessing. There will be some soul-filled turmoil. But eventually the reward will outweigh the risk. It always does. And this is from Bishop Spong, and I absolutely love it. Religion at its core is based on the arrogance of believing that human beings not only can discern the ways of God, but can also act in such a way as to control the actions of God. The human sense of fairness is read into the understanding of God. The human desire to control other people's behaviors reinforces the usual theological wisdom that expresses itself in a reward and punishment mentality. Heaven and hell are nothing more than the assertion that the mind of God, as we human beings have created it, is still operating to reward or punish us after our death. Religion almost inevitably creates God in the image of the human being. Religion almost inevitably creates God in the image of the human being and tries to force all of reality into that frame of reference, lest it otherwise prove to be inadequate. That is why there is no religious system that is eternal. That is why when human experience can no longer be interpreted adequately inside the traditional religious framework, the framework itself begins to die. The death of a religious system is never easy. The fear engendered by the loss of religion or even by what we think of as the death of God, engulfs human life as if it were a sea of total emptiness. Such a death is conducive to emotional denial, fundamentalist fervor, or a killing hostility directed toward that which or those who have shattered our religious delusions. It also, however, produces emancipation from the evils of religion that many people welcome. It is the evils of religion that force us either into new religious oppression or into the building of a new understanding. The struggle to find a new alternative also stretches our consciousness. There's that opening, that no closed-mindedness here. Stretches our consciousness into new dimensions of what it means to be human. And that is where hope is born. So Kohelet's invitation, therefore, blends the autonomy of individual reason with the permission to explore the ways of the universe, life under the sun. It's a profound invitation, but departing from the ways of established tradition is not an easy undertaking. However, when it comes to the pursuit of hope and meaning, easiness is neither promised nor guaranteed. Life itself isn't easy. Being human, being fully human, isn't easy. It's not for the faint of heart. Life is filled with struggle and fraught with difficulty. We're faced constantly with insecurities and uncertainties. And none of us gets a free pass. So it's no wonder why so many people turn to religiosity for easy answers, to provide certainty in the face of uncertainty, to provide security in the face of insecurity. Pray this prayer, profess this creed, espouse this dogma, give exactly 10% of your income, gross. And to most rational people, this is completely unreasonable. Yet people flock to this en masse. Why? Because it provides people with a simple, quick way to attain what they are convinced they need to live and survive. Etha.
Hispanic culture, you're taught never to speak Spanish, and you're told not to have an accent so you can assimilate into an American culture.
Yeah, the immigration culture is another culture that demands assimilation. Don't speak Spanish. Lose your accent. If you're a Muslim woman, do not wear hijab.
I was just listening to a podcast this morning. They're in Miami, and it took me what I've been listening to for about like 10, 13 years now to learn like 3 years ago. The person, they always call him Mike Ryan, but his real name is Mike Ryan Ruiz.
Mm-hmm.
His family named him Ryan has been known by like professionally because it was his way of assimilating, and it made it easy for him to get a job.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's a son of immigrants, and his family like ingrained that into him, and they all of them like on the show. One name is like Guillermo, but they just call him Benny. Like they all
Yeah.
did it in their own way.
Yeah. I have met a number of immigrants who have taken on anglicized names. And when I ask, and sometimes I ask them, I said, "Is that your given name?" And they'll say, "No, my birth name is this," and it's this beautiful name. And I'm like, "So why did you choose Sue? Why did you choose Anne?" Not that there's anything wrong with Sue or Anne, right? But is that really who you are? Yeah. But it's that attempt to assimilate. Yeah. And, and it doesn't matter what our background is. We're all going to be placed into situations that demand our assimilation. These are our ways, these are our customs. Imbibe them and embrace them as your own. Do not do anything that deviates from that. Do not, or else, right? Out of fear of social ostracization, out of the possibility a presidential candidate might say something about you in a debate, and now all of a sudden your community is under attack and faced with unimaginable threats. Yeah. And yet, in a way, we look at this, and to borrow a phrase from Kohelet, I have observed a great evil, because it's evil. To project this onto another person, to demand this from another person, rather than seeing the gifts and the contributions that person has to offer. And yet, we see it all the time in religious circles when it comes to expressions of faith as well. Eventually, it's going to fall apart. Eventually, it has to. And I think both with the expressions of faith and with that, with the example of the assimilation for immigrants, for Latinx immigrants or Muslim immigrants, or whichever, all of them, and their own imposed assimilationist demands. Whether it's faith or something outside of faith and in the public square, all of it appeals to the most primal parts of our psyches, to the need to survive. And so, whether it's don't wear hijab, don't speak with an accent, or pray this prayer, all of it speaks to that need for survival, whether in this life or in the next. But wisdom and meaning, however, are not primarily concerned with survival. It rises above that. And it rises above our need to survive and enters into what we need to live a fulfilled life. And unfortunately, many people drift into the entrapments of simplicity and familiarity, which is why Kohelet's reflections are needed now more than ever. And I write here, his raw honesty and his delightfully curmudgeonly approach to life simultaneously bring us down to earth while also transporting us into the world of wonder that dares to protest what we have been given and dare to grow in never-before-seen wisdoms, knowledges, truths, and insights. And to believe what we experience, our own experiences and observations, are a valid litmus test for gaining wisdom. And so where do we go from here? Well, we're going to continue talking about life under the sun, the way things are. And on our journey, we're going to allow Kohelet to continue to poke holes in our own thinking and to prod us onto new ways of thinking as we ponder His reflections and our own. And they begin to deepen us and to take us into a new outlook on life. And so we're going to start thinking, and thinking freely with Him. And in doing so, to discover hope and meaning anew. So, where do we go from here? Well, I think we need to dare to be dissatisfied with whatever truths or wisdoms we have been given and may no longer serve us. Know that they are not the end-all, be-all. We need to be bold enough to question the unquestionable. Nothing in this life is exempt from scrutiny. We need to enjoy the emptiness and know that we are joining with all of creation in waiting for what possibilities might emerge next. We need to fearlessly think freely. Use the rational abilities God created us with to pursue wisdom and discern wisdom in our own lives. Because there is no greater than possessing the ability to think for ourselves and not using it. That truly is futile, absurdity, and chasing after wind. So with that, we'll turn the page to chapter 2 next week. So please plan to read, to join us having read chapter 2 of Ecclesiastes. We've got a few more minutes. Any final closing questions or comments? It's not they're not indoctrination centers. They're critical thinking centers. Yeah, it's a great observation. Well, in next week's session of the University of Kohelet, we're going to take a deeper look into kind of that state of nothingness and what nothingness might have to teach us about the nature of life. It'll be a really good session. I'm looking forward to it. Chapter 2 is rich, very, very rich.
Excuse me, that statement kind of reminds me of, I started watching Doug Sheldon, and when he was trying to tutor his neighbor Billy in math, and then some statement that said there's no zero, and then Sheldon freaks out about zero doesn't exist, and he goes to the professors, and so that kind of put me in mind of that.
Yeah. Yeah, Patrick's mother loves young Sheldon, and when I found out, I told Patrick, I said, of course she does, because young Sheldon probably reminds her of you when you were a kid. So, I get it. Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining me here tonight, and thank you for all of those who have joined online. And we look forward to being with you again next Wednesday.